Hey, I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and I want to help you today because I hear a lot of people use the phrase, I need to upload my podcast to iTunes. And I want to help you understand iTunes, help you understand RSS today, because actually you never upload anything to iTunes. iTunes simply tunes into your podcast. So let's start off with something that we understand, and that's radio. So let's look at this. There's our DJ in his booth. And, of course, he talks into a microphone that then gets broadcasted, his signal, whatever it might be, 100.7, et cetera, et cetera. And that 100.7 or whatever it is on your radio dial, we don't know how to encode that, how to listen to it. It's just a sine wave, whatever it is. And so we use something called a radio that basically turns that signal into something that we can understand. Well, it's not a whole lot different in podcasting. Here you have the podcaster, and he's talking into his microphone, but instead of being turned into a signal, it's turned into what we call a feed, and it's syndicated via, and there are many different words for this, I call it real simple syndication, and that then is, again, kind of gobbledygook, just like our sound wave, and so we use something to turn that into something that we can enjoy, and that, in this case, we're just going to say iTunes. There are plenty of different programs that you can use to subscribe to a podcast, but the biggest one is iTunes. So what happens then is iTunes is, again, it tunes into your website and it never changes the channel. That way, when you change something on your website, that will actually be updated into iTunes. So again, iTunes subscribes to your website via RSS, and it can subscribe to many other different websites. So you can have multiple podcasts that you listen to, and every time you start iTunes, or again, whatever software you're using, it will automatically go out and see if there are new episodes. And if they're there, it will automatically bring them into your software. So again, what happens is iTunes is watching your RSS feed. It's listening, for lack of a better phrase, to your website. And I mailed my website with a program called WordPress. It's free, but iTunes doesn't understand just your basic feed. It needs it to be iTunes compliant. Special little coding you need to add. And I use a plugin, and you're like, what's a plugin? A plugin is kind of like adding air conditioning to your car. You have your basic car, and then you add air conditioning, which adds additional functionality. So I use a plugin called PowerPress to add the functionality to make my standard feed now iTunes compliant. What happens is when you are at your website, you will attach your audio or video file to your blog post. Let's see what this looks like in real life. So going back to feeds, you can see here I have a number of icons. You can subscribe to my podcast in many different directories. And so just to show you what an RSS feed looks like, they're really, really ugly. When I click on this, this is actually my RSS feed. And as you'll see here, they're really not meant to be read. This is something, again, this is like the signal of your radio station. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook. But when you put this gobbledygook into iTunes, it translates it into something that we can understand. But you can see inside of all this gobbledygook, it knows exactly where my MP3 file is. And this is an interview with John Pascal. So here is what that looks like on the front end. And in the back end of WordPress, it looks a lot like Microsoft Word. Here's your bold buttons and things like that. So here I said you attach your media to your blog post. So here's my blog post, and down here I would just copy, in this case, my audio file from Libsyn and just paste it in here and click on the verify button. And now when people are at this particular blog post, even though it's on my website, WordPress knows that the audio is on my media host, and the end user really doesn't need to know where it's coming from. They just know that when they click on this button, it actually plays. So just to show you here, I'm going to put my mouse over download, and you'll see down there in the bottom left-hand corner, it's showing the actual location of the file. So again, your typical visitor just clicks play, and it plays. They don't care where it comes from. They just know that either your audio or your video is playing. So like I said, you have your WordPress site, and you've attached your audio or your video. And again, I'm using PowerPress to make my feed iTunes compliant. There are a lot of ways to do this. I know my media host Libsyn, Libsyn, also provides a feed, but for this example, I'm showing PowerPress. So here I am back in WordPress. I'm looking at PowerPress, and here's a tab where I can put all the information about my show, and this is what is shown in the iTunes directory. In fact, there's even a tab here just for the artwork, and we can see here's the artwork. Now, how does that work for iTunes? If we come over here and I click on this icon, it will go ahead and launch iTunes for me. And so here is my listing in iTunes, and you can see here's the artwork, and here's everything that in this case is coming from the PowerPress plugin. And when I click on subscribe, it goes ahead and adds it to all the other podcasts that I may have been subscribed to in iTunes. And to see those, I just come over here way over on the right and click on library. And if I hadn't already, I could choose podcast. So here is my show, and you can see it's downloading the latest episode. And what's great about iTunes is I can come over here and say, show me all the old episodes. And if I want, I can click with one button to add them all, or I can just pick which ones I want and click on done. And those will automatically be downloaded. Now, the great thing about this is when I put out a new episode, because iTunes is listening to my show, it will automatically download the latest episode. And here you can see I've gone ahead and double clicked on this. It started to play my podcast, and I can get all the information about that show with that. So that's how you subscribe to a podcast. To unsubscribe, you simply click on it and press delete, and that will take it out of your iTunes. So that's what it looks like again. So we said that WordPress has your audio or video in the actual Word post. That goes through PowerPress, which puts in all the iTunes information, and that then creates an iTunes compliant RSS feed, which is then being sent to iTunes. So in the future, all I have to do is add a new post in WordPress that will update PowerPress and my RSS feed, which will again update iTunes. So here again, all you have to do once you submit it to iTunes, you simply make a new blog post, attach your media to it, whether it be audio or video. That again will have all the iTunes specifics about that episode put into your RSS feed, and that again will update iTunes. So once you submit to iTunes, all you do is continue making great content. And you can see the MP3 file, the video file, is not in iTunes. iTunes is simply listening to your website, and your website has all the information about where the media is. And when new things are added, iTunes automatically hears it. So that's, you don't upload things to iTunes. You simply subscribe to podcasts in iTunes.